All very, very welcome to Queens for one of the highlights of the academic year here in architecture. It's wonderful to see at least the names of so many people from around the world. We have colleagues from ARUP, our generous sponsors. We have not one, but I think at least two of our honorary professors are here. We have many guests from the profession, and we have students, of course. So we're all delighted that so many people can come in these interesting times. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Sarah Lappin, and I have the great honor of being the head of architecture at Queens. I hope that most of you know that tonight's lecture by Marina Tabassum represents our annual Peter Rice Memorial Lecture, which is sponsored by the ARUP Trust. The lectures have been running since 2014, and we thank them profoundly for their continued support, with particular acknowledgement of the involvement of Rory McGowan, who's here tonight. I also must express my sincere gratitude on the part of myself and my colleagues to Professor Michael McGarry, whose ongoing commitment to ensuring the event occurs each year is absolutely essential to its success. And he's also our Zoom master tonight. So thank you very much, Michael. We really appreciate all your hard work and generosity. So I think, first of all, it's important to ensure that everyone knows about Peter Rice and why it is we celebrate him every year with this wonderful event. Peter was the preeminent, and I think that's fair to say, the preeminent structural engineer of the latter half of the 20th century. He was born in Dublin, reared in County Louth and County Monaghan, and entered Queen's University Belfast in 1952, initially to study aeronautical engineering, but he promptly transferred to civil engineering. During his period at Queen's, he joined the University Rowing Club and learned to fly with Queen's University's Air Squadron. Peter graduated from Queen's in 1955, departed to London, and spent much of his professional life based in London and Paris, working on such seminal projects as the Sydney Opera House, the Centre Pompidou in Paris, Lloyd's Building in London, the Menil Museum in Houston, Texas, and many, many other extraordinary projects. And unfortunately for all of us, he died prematurely in 1992. My first experience of Peter's work came in 1995 when I was a master's student and was given a copy of Peter's wonderful book, An Engineer Imagines, by my structures professor. And with the launch of the film of the same name in 2019, the world has learned that Peter was not only a superb engineer and designer, but a man deeply committed to great collaborations across disciplines. So tonight, with the work of Marina Tabassum, we also celebrate Peter, a man who seems to always have been able to not only solve problems beautifully, with great confidence, but also a person who thrived on working with others and who celebrated his role as a deeply engaged and generous human being. In 2019, Marina stated that, quote, "To me, architecture has far greater values than just being a project to instant appeal and flash and glamour and fashion. For her," she said, "design is all about intelligence. Whatever budget you have, how well you can address it, it must be through design, and it must include people." She said that's why many of her projects are community-involved projects. Her method and architecture, I think, are deeply based in the physical, cultural, and economic context of Bangladesh. Marina is a graduate of the Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. She founded Dhaka-based Marina Tabassum Architects in 2005 after 10 years as partner and co-founder of Urbana and Dhaka. Marina has taught and lectured widely, including a long-standing affiliation with BRAC University and Dhaka, lectures at universities across the globe, including Harvard and now Queen's, and had a visiting professorship at Delft in 2019. And she teaches because she says she likes being engaged by younger minds. She and her firm won the Aga KhanAward in 2016 for the Ur Roof Mosque in Dhaka. Marina is also the first architect to win the Jameel Prize, which is a partnership between Dubai-based Art Jameel and the Victoria and Albert Museum. Coincidentally, Marina initiated a project with Peter Rice, and perhaps we can ask her about that project later in the evening. Her firm, MTA, quote, focuses on using local materials where possible, and they pay particular attention to local climate, culture, and history. In 2018, they created The Wisdom of the Land, which was an installation at the 2018 Venice Architecture Biennale, and that was based on the vernacular architecture of Bengali courtyards and their ability to create a sense of community. This is where I got to experience Marina's work firsthand. I absolutely loved it. She described the project as one in which we can see how people can live symbiotically with both one another and their environments. And to me, the project elegantly exemplified her argument that the responsibility of architect goes beyond architecture, not just a beautiful creation of space. It needs to involve people and community. Marina has generously stayed up into the very small hours of the morning to share her work with us, so we extend our heartiest thanks. She's also agreed very, very generously to take a few questions at the end of the lecture. So we'll sort that out when we get there. Perhaps people could put questions into the chat, although we'll only be able to take a few. So without any further ado, I'm delighted to be able to introduce this year's esteemed speaker, Marina Tabassum.
Thank you, Sarah. That was absolutely wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's morning for me. It's 12:10. So, well, it's an absolutely honor to be present here and to give this talk. I'll be sharing my screen. Let me just, okay. I hope everything goes well. Right. So, well, I would have loved to be in the university and in Belfast, where I've never been before, but you know, as it is now that we are living in a time of this pandemic, where we've already seen worldwide the case has, you know, crossed over 56 million, and there are deaths about 1,356,000 people have already died. We went into lockdown in March, and from that time on, it has been a very confusing time. I also had the virus in April, and I suffered. Well, fortunately, it was mild, so it was over in 2 weeks, but I've seen friends, colleagues, many have passed, many have really suffered badly. So I think, you know, it's a time where I felt that there was so much to reflect upon, especially when we entered into this whole lockdown. The first lesson to me was, you know, when I was looking at all the different news and everything, and even for ourselves, like, what is it that you really need? What is actually your need, and what is your want? So basically that was the first lesson in many ways for the entire world. Okay, so this doesn't work. This all at times happen. I just have to stop sharing and then go back and do it again, because at times it just doesn't work. I'll close it and I'll go again. Right. So, do you see my screen?
Not yet, no.
Not yet? Okay.
Yes, starting.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, great.
All right. Okay, it doesn't go. I don't know why. Stop sharing. I'll close again. Okay, let's see if it works. Do you see it now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I don't know what happened. It's just not progressing.
Marina, I wonder if you click on the arrow at the bottom left and advance that way.
Say it again.
I wonder if you click on the arrow that shows in the bottom left of your
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So basically, okay, let me go back to the first one. Where was I? So yeah, basically what I was wanting to talk about is the fact that obviously we are facing a pandemic, and hopefully there is a vaccine which is pretty much close, and we are hopeful that it will be there. But for me, it came to this point that where I think there's a much greater pandemic, which is actually called Affluenza, as you can see here, which is this strange desire we feel to spend money that we don't have, to buy things that we don't need, to impress people who, you know, we do not know. And this is a complete scene which has kind of taken the entire world with this consumer culture, which was in a way, you know, it was encouraged by those who make profit out of a culture of exploitation. And we've seen this idea of growth, or the fetishization of growth, and how it has depleted all our resources, exhausting the entire natural scene. And then at the same time, the disparity that has grown between the super rich and the super poor. And so this cannot go on. That's what I feel, that we need to really look at it, especially in this time when things are not moving as fast as it used to be. So this new normal, as we talk about, this needs to look into this whole issue of what we are doing to the earth, and, you know, this whole idea of affluenza or consumer culture that we have. So things that are made in China, let's say especially plastic, going all over the world, ending up in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And from 1950 till now, we have produced 8 billion tons of plastic, and half of it has gone into landfills. And our construction industry is not very far. I mean, 50% of the climate change was contributed by our construction industry. So those things need to change in many ways. What is quite appalling is the fact that the second most consumed thing in the world is concrete. It's not food. First is water, and then it's concrete. So that's really alarming, the fact that where we are at this point in time. And so I think this whole idea of anthropogenic metabolism and the material flow and all these aspects that are so important, especially in our construction industry, that we need to really look into. And in many ways, our focus needs to shift. The entire paradigm, or you know, the dominant order that was prevailing, let's say, in the pre-pandemic era, needs to really shift. And we need to shift our focus from man to nature. And for me, it's much more compelling and important because of the fact that this whole issue of climate change and the sea level rise directly involves in the country where I live, where I'm born, and where I'm a citizen of. This is where I'm based. And the prediction shows that by 2050, there will be a 1 meter sea level rise in Bangladesh. And we already see the effect of it as the salt water is moving into the sweetwater system, and you see all the different biodiversity that is changing. Now, to take you around what is Bangladesh and where it is, Bangladesh is basically 2/3 is delta. And there are these mighty rivers, which are the Brahmaputra, the Ganges, and the Meghna. All are coming out of the Himalayan range and then flushing into the Bay of Bengal. And if you see here, this map shows that it's actually a crisscrossing network of different forms of water. There are rivers, wetlands, ponds, lakes, all kinds of water system. And then it's basically flushing into the Bay of Bengal. And it's an image here of a satellite image. You see 20 years, how the water system actually changes its course, and how fluid and dynamic this entire system is. And in the ground, if you look at it, this is what it looks like. So when there is, during the monsoon season, especially in the summer months, when there is enormous current in these large rivers, it erodes the banks. And a lot of small towns and villages have been washed away because of this erosion. And here you see a mosque being taken by the river. So that's one scene. And definitely it causes a lot of devastation among people, loss of life, loss of home, land. Many people have become landless, became migrants, went to different cities and towns. So this is a very sad scenario of this area. And on the other hand, there is these new sandbeds that emerge in the in the waters, in the riverbeds during the dry season, especially when the current is much slower. So you see, this is not really land in that sense, but it's sandbeds where it's a kind of a very intertwined relationship of earth and water. So you cannot really call it land, and it's not even water. It's something in between. And I find this quite interesting, where Anuradha Mathur and Dilip Dakunna talks about it, that there is no such thing as dry land, wetness is everywhere. And you cannot really draw any line between land and water, especially in our context. It is so much true, the fact that you cannot really draw any line. There is no distinction. So why does this happen? If you see this map here, this is a map by Renown from 1776. And if you see the rivers, you see here the Ganges, and then the Brahmaputra had a different formation. Here it's much more clearer. But during the Assam earthquake in 1950, Brahmaputra actually changed its course and got connected to the Ganges, and then turned into this mighty force. And as these earths that you see around, which was getting washed away, are all alluvium, very fragile, soft soil that are actually brought in by the rivers itself, and accumulated silt, just delta, this just becomes, very fragile, and because of the dynamism, it erodes. And on the other hand, it's a tide-dominated delta. So during the dry season, during tide, the water goes back into the system. So that's when you have these sandbeds being created. And if you see the map here, these pink areas, this entire area of Bangladesh is actually delta. More, I would say, the progradation of the Ganges estuary. So this part is more matured, so they don't move anymore. But this blue area is still a very active delta, so it's constantly moving. So we were given, in the Sharjah Architecture Triennial, which was last year, we were commissioned to do a research where we looked into the rights of the future generation, and Adrian Lahoud of RCA was the curator for that triennial. And so we were commissioned to see how people actually move in these areas. So if you see here, there were lots of interesting narratives, like how people have moved in one lifetime to 2, 3, 4 different places, moved their houses from one place to another. And the entire village has moved from one location to other. And so that's a very interesting narrative. And if you look at the houses, especially the vernacular houses that has been developed in these areas, also have this quality where it is a mobile structure, a flat pack system in a way, where you can take it down and move it to a safer location when you see that the river will be eroding. So it's a very unique form of a flat pack mobile house system. And in some of the towns along the entire belt of Brahmaputra and Ganges, you'll find these shops where you can actually buy these houses. So you can order and you can buy houses, and you can take it to your location, and they can also come and build it for you. So it's a very interesting system of assembly and disassembly, which has become quite a part and parcel of the entire belt where this movement happens. And so what we did is, for the Sharjah Triennial, we ordered 3 houses. So we bought 3 houses from the market and we took it to Sharjah. I'll show you those images later. But before that, there's an interesting story. Since we were looking into the rights of future generation, we had to look how inheritance actually happens when there is this dynamism. So what is interesting, what we found is that during the British colonial rule, there was something called the Bengal Tenancy Act. And from the Bengal Tenancy Act, all these moving sandbeds were considered land, and they were registered as land. As you can see here, this map, which is a CS map or cadastral subdivision, which shows land. And if you take this map, which was from the 1800s, and if you place it in a satellite image current satellite image, this is what it shows. So the river was probably going along that line, but now the river has shifted. So part of this area is absolutely not there anymore. It has become water, and part are still land. So basically, and if you see, I mean, we basically plotted one single plot, which is 1862. And if you see here, all these images, it shows the exact location of that plot. And in 1972, it was still a land, but then by 2000, it became water. And then again, in 2019, there is the new land is again emerging. But if you see here, these are the land deeds. This shows, this is the lease deed, which when the land was actually registered into a document, and then this was leased out to the locals to earn revenue. And after that, when the colonial empire ended, these lands were sold to the locals. So they bought this land, which is not really land. And then this was later on going from one generation to the next generation. So basically here you see the pedigree, how the entire inheritance actually worked. And these are the two people who are now inheriting this piece of paper. So the interesting thing is that the land moves, people move, but the papers are stagnant and it's just fixed. So people are always waiting and hoping that the land will come back. So this is something quite interesting, because it's a sort of probably a practice of a dry culture, which was imposed on a wet culture, which is not really, based on that similar notion of land and water. So that was our study in a way. And this is the venue of Sharjah Triennial. It's an abandoned school from the 80s. And so this venue has been turned into the Sharjah Triennial ground. And we were given this courtyard where we actually took the houses. As I said, that we bought 3 houses and we placed it in this courtyard. So in a normal Bangladeshi setting, this is what it looks like. So we took one of the houses. So we have 3 houses here. And architects from my office, I think there were 4 architects and 1 carpenter. All of them went to the site and they built it themselves. So this is an entire project, which I mean, building meaning that they assembled it. So we had the house as our exhibition venue as well. So we had all the panels and everything inside. So you see here the city of Sharjah and our 3 houses. And they're really beautiful structures. And the Sharjah Triennial has actually acquired that. So it's in their archive at the moment. So from following that, while we were all locked up in this COVID crisis and work was slow, we decided to work on this idea of knockdown system. And if we can make a house or a modular house, which we can then give it to the landless people or people who are living in these sandbeds who do not have land actually or any place to go. And if it could be a structure which is easy to build and dismantle, and then when they need to move, they could move it. So it's a mobile modular house in a way. And we needed to make it as cheap as possible. So this is a house which we have been able to build with $200. And so what it is basically, as you can see, it's kind of a space frame structure. And it has these steel joints on the corners, and these are all bamboo, because bamboo is the cheapest and easy to find anywhere in Bangladesh. And then you could have the facade in whatever material, and it could be a corrugated sheet roofing, or it could be anything else, depending on the budget. And these are all the components that you see here. And this is what we were thinking, that if the people in the living in these sandbeds who are landless, basically, if we can provide them with these kind of houses, it'll be easier for them to take it with them, much lightweight and everything. So we made one such structure as a first model. So this is a live structure which we built, and it is sort of sturdy. As you can see, it has these corner steel joints. And I know there are a lot of engineers probably listening to this talk. If you have any good ideas which we can implement, I'll be happy to get some feedback from you. So this is our first structure. So that's why it will be really great to have some ideas. So there are 2 floors actually. So you see here, that's the lower level and that's the upper level. This is the British High Commissioner and his wife who visited the site, the small house. Basically, we are now looking into giving these houses, at least make 10 of these in the sand beds where landless people are living, to try out and see how they accept it and how they're able to live with it. And the other thing is, since the reason of having two levels is the fact that one is obviously you can have the upper level as a sleeping area, the lower level would be more of your daily life activities. And the other thing is, if there is flooding, at least you can move to the upper level. That was the idea. And this model can also be, you can join 2 or 3 and you can make it elongated or even have it on the sides. And this can also turn into a income generation source if you want to have a lower level using for your economic something, and then on the upper level you could have a place where you can sleep at night. So this could also work in the city context. So that's one of the projects that we've kind of continued with the research. Now moving more to the mature delta, this part is actually our the mangrove forest, which is the largest mangrove forest in the world, and also very much potentially in danger because of the sea level rise. And very close to the Sundarban forest, we have one site, which is the Ponygram Resort. So it's a resort in the delta, and this part doesn't move. It's a very mature delta, but it's a very rich agriculture land because it's a fertile ground. We have 3 crops a year. And this is where one of our clients wanted to build a very authentic Bangladeshi resort, where people would go and understand and have a good understanding of how people live in the delta. So this is our site, and you can see how beautifully green it is, and mostly agrarian farmland. And there are villages surrounding the site. This is the site actually, and there are some villages surrounding it. And that's the location, that's the site here. And this is a river that's going past the site, which is known as the Kopotakko River. And around the site, we have these nice, lush, green paddy fields. And in a way, the life is very slow paced, very natural. There is no, in a way, nothing of technology, let's say, or even anything what we see, urbanity hasn't really touched this land. So when I was there for the very first time for site visit, for me, it was really, kind of a dilemma or anxiousness, like how do I address a site like this, which is so pristine, and especially from my school and the formal architecture background that I have, we were never really taught to design anything in a vernacular fashion, or let's say, I just didn't feel that it would be a right thing to do to just bring my baggage or knowledge of architecture and just put it there. So that became a dilemma. And this is what I felt then, that rural Bangladesh is uniquely beautiful, the soul of the Delta land. It feels like a crime to invade this silence with the roaring noise of architecture. So I thought that, since I do not know how to address this land, how to minimally be invasive about this so that I do not disrupt the natural setting and the dynamics that exists here, I thought it would be better to learn how people live and, to get some clues from there to be able to build something. So if you look into the Delta being so flat, that the way people build is the first act of building is actually digging a pond. So they dig a pond, they take the earth out, they create a mound, and on the mound, they basically place their houses. So there's a section here, you see on the mound are the houses, and the water, when it rains, water goes into the ponds. So there is a certain kind of an undulation that's created by people by themselves. So this is here, you see a pond, and this is the homestead where you have the houses. And a rural household is basically, this is the program of a rural household, where you see rooms where people sleep, there is toilet, there is kitchen, there are all the different houses for all the different animals. And so basically, this is an entire program of a household. And this is how the entire household actually is gathered as a homestead. So basically they have a courtyard, and then around the courtyard, they have the houses surrounding it. And these courts are not really distinctly defined. They're just very loose spaces. And one courtyard is connected to the next courtyard. And then it's a very communal way of living. So that's how people live. Very social and communal way of living. So one courtyard is linked with the other, so they're all connected. So it's like a one large family. The entire village is like a one large family. So this is one of the villages, as you see here. That's Hindupara, a potter's village, very close to the site. So we studied the entire village, tried to document it, and tried to understand how people live, and all the different ways of construction and how do they build the houses and everything. And this is another village, which is the weavers village, who work with bamboo. So their formation is again a bit different because based on the trade that they have. And so these are some of the sketches and the people who live around the site. So these are the potters. And the other thing which is quite unique is this roof system, which is the Bangla roof. Which is a kind of it's a pitch roof, but with a curved formation. It comes out of the bamboo ridge that is in the center. And what it does is when it rains, it gives you two different angles where the water goes out very quickly. And that's also the same roof that the Mughals have copied in some of the forts in Agra and also in Lahore. And also the same roof you'll find in the temples in Bangladesh. So this is a kind of a unique form, which is very local. And you don't see that anymore. It's completely lost because of the corrugated sheet, which is easily available, durable, easy to maintain. So people have moved to that, and you don't see that roof anymore, which is mostly thatch based. And here is our site. So we have the river. Our idea was to bring in the guests with a nice boat ride, bring them to the site. And this is the only access we have, road access. So we wanted to take our back of house to the end of the site and to have this area mostly for the houses. So that became our master plan, as you can see here. A very meandering kind of a path, which is mostly people could walk around. And these are the houses that we kind of came up with as an idea that this will be made out of mud as a material. So these are mud houses because that's what the people locally build with. And it's earth, that's delta, that's the only material that's available there. So earth and bamboo and wood in many cases and thatch. And we tried to organize it in that similar manner as people generally live there. The other thing that we did was that we did the master plan and we know where to place everything. So basically we did the entire planning, but then we wanted the villagers to come and build it with us. And the reason is that they have the knowledge. This is about the wisdom of the place. And so we wanted them to come and work with us. And what it generated was the fact that, you have these younger men or younger generation who do not have this knowledge of the skill that their forefathers had. And they're not interested because they do not generate enough income. So they all went to school and now they're looking for a job, going to the city. probably ending up in Dhaka, working in one of these garment industries or factories where, the life is not that great in any way. So we thought that, if we could just keep them in their own location, bring the pride of place back again in some ways, so that they can be a part of this whole journey and have a meaningful contribution and also have their own generation of income. So in a way, these like him, we had many of these younger generation who then came and worked with us to build the entire project. So for the project, we used sun-dried mud bricks. So this is absolutely sun-dried mud brick right before it went into baking into the kiln. And we used mud mortar. And these are really thick walls, about 30 inches thick. I mean, we are still on inches and feet, sorry about that. And we used everything which are local people. And here you see the roof, that beautiful form of roof. We tried to bring it back, reviving it, and using thatch. And you don't find these people who had the knowledge of building with thatch anymore, because nobody builds it. So we found two groups of people who actually still know how to do it. So we brought them from the Sundarbans, and then basically they helped us build it. And we have women working on the site, and because the plaster is always the best with women, they do the best plaster. So this is one of the houses, as you see here. That's the elevation, the riverside elevation of the project. So yeah, in a way, I would say that we've designed the process. We designed the entire planning, but then we let the villagers build it, because it also generated a local kind of an income and an economy. And also our client and us, we both wanted it to be a very socially and environmentally responsible project in that location, so that it does not cry out loud as architecture. So yeah, so these are some of the bungalows. So what we did while we were working there with the locals in the villages, we developed a nice relationship with all the village people. And once we thought that once these project will be built and the construction will be finished, now we have to do something that can keep on, this whole situation keep going. Like there would be an interesting relationship between the resort and the people who are living there, because that will create a kind of a sense of ownership also for the people, locals there. And so what we created with the client is the Ponygram Community Initiative. And through the initiatives, we did some craft diversification workshops where the locals learned to diversify the crafting that they already knew. So to do certain things that would then generate more income from the from the resort guests. And we also created this savings group where the women of the villages started saving their own fund, $1 a week. Each one of them would put in. So this is a nice small saving group that now they have accumulated quite a good amount of fund. Now they have an account where they put their money, and from their own savings, they can now lend money to themselves to be able to improve their house, or let's say the environment and everything. And this entire process also, what we did is we started mapping the villages, and the maps that I showed you were actually maps that were done by the young girls and boys of the village, who actually measured their own houses and then created that map. That map was never there before. We needed the maps in a way for them to have an understanding of their own of their own land, and at the same time, if they wanted to build upon it a house or something, then they would have some understanding. So this is one such project. Here you see this is the process where you have the map first, and then they make an aspirational model. We call this a co-creation process, and then from there, basically making these houses. these are all $1,500 houses. So this is a 2-story, $1,500 house. And so this, you see here, the processes, how it was built. And this was also my studio work while I was teaching at Harvard GSD. And the project was design a $2,000 home. And for the students to understand, for a villager, $2,000 is actually 3 cows and a goat. And that's the budget. So my students traveled to Bangladesh and they went and visited some of these houses, which are $1,500 houses. And we just wanted to see what else they could offer other than what we were able to do here. So the students actually tried out different kind of materials that are available in the site, like bamboo, brick, mud, all these different materials. They also talked to so we had 5 clients. So they went and talked to the clients, they made models and they tried to understand what their needs are. So in a way, really treating them as clients and to understand what their needs. And so these are the houses, and these students, basically then we had an exhibition on site of the works that they produced. Here you see one of the groups talking to one of the families, one of the clients. Here, the review. And here again, we have these exhibitions going on in the village to show what the houses were done. So these are some of the student projects that came up. For the potters, they used pottery to reduce the cost. So this is a $2,000 project. And it was quite difficult for them in a way. They had to keep count of every single penny that was being spent. And one architect and an engineer from my office was keeping, was going back and forth, calculating if the projects are actually within the cost. So yeah, so there were very interesting projects that came up from the studies. And so we had the plan to build 5 of these houses, and we still want to build it, but it took us a little while because we needed to accumulate the funds, because we wanted the villagers themselves to fund the projects. And so, yeah, so hopefully after the COVID, we'll be able to do that. So this is the book report that came out of GSD, $2,000 home co-creating in the Bengal Delta. So this is also, again, Sarah was mentioning that this is what I took to Venice for the Venice Biennale, and we called it Wisdom of the Land. Wisdom for me is, now that we are so much flooded with information and data, wisdom comes absolutely at the top, because it is about experience and knowledge. And then from knowledge, the refinement and evolution of knowledge then becomes wisdom. And we should not lose it. And it's there in the land. And when I was doing this project, every time I was there on the site, every time I felt that there is so much knowledge that is there, of living symbiotically with nature, which are really becoming lost, getting lost because we're not paying attention to that. So that's the Arsenale, as you know, and that's where our site was located. And for us, what we did is we wanted to create this courtyard of a Bengali house or a Bengali homestead, where we wanted to bring in all these interesting wise or wisdom that people actually live with. So that's the site you see here. And what we did is we collected all these different elements that you see in the household. And people quite generously donated their things, like these are granaries where people generally keep their grains, made out of mud. And this lady, she actually donated her granary here, as you see here in Venice. And so these are all very nice, generous people. They all donated some of their own things. And we took it all to Venice, and we created this courtyard, in a way, a Bengali courtyard, where you don't see the houses because the houses are absolutely just in lines. But what you see is what people have actually made with their own hands and actually used it. These are all things that they've been using. So it was quite an interesting experience for me. And we donated this to the Technical University Berlin because we didn't want to bring it back. It was too expensive. So, so we donated. So it's now with their natural building lab. Coming more to the south, this is, I'm not going to Dhaka yet. This is actually more to the Chittagong coast, which is more to the east. And in April 1991, there was this devastating cyclone, which actually, because there was no embankment, it was right in the south of Chittagong. Chittagong is the port city, and you see here the devastation of the cyclone. 138,000 people lost their lives, and a site where we designed a small project, there 40,000 people lost their lives. So it was really a devastating cyclone. And so this is where the sea is, the Bay of Bengal, and that's the site. And we are working on this project now. We were commissioned to create a mosque and at the same time a health hub. These areas are so remote that there is hardly any health facility available in these areas. And so the client wanted to create this health hub, which would be connected to the mosque, local mosque, so that people can come and use the mosque and at the same time use the health facilities that are being offered, telemedicine and all other different kind of facilities, public health. And the other thing, what we felt was that it's so close to the sea and we have the cyclone. So why don't we use this mosque also as a cyclone shelter? Because the houses where people live are actually very fragile. So it's a customary thing in Bangladesh that when there is this cyclone approaching, people generally move from their houses to a cyclone shelter in a safer location until the cyclone passes, and then they can move. So basically that was the idea. So it's a kind of a very interesting, complex thing that you have a mosque, a shelter, and also as a small health hub. So I kind of tried to bring all these things together. This is a beautiful mosque in the old part of the city, a Mughal mosque, and it's the lower part of that. And this is, as you know, one of Louis Kahn's hospital that we have here in Dhaka. Beautiful building where I really love these circular punches and this beautiful labyrinth-like portico that the mosque, that the hospital has. So I kind of tried to bring it all together in a way. We created an embankment on the side so that it is above the level of the surge as the water generally is expected. We have the lower level as the health hub. The upper level is working as the mosque, and we have a courtyard in the middle. So this is basically the section. And if you see here, that would be the site, and that is the embankment, and the road is on that side. And the way we designed it is that each one of these blocks are individually working on its own. And we kept these openings to have the airflow passing through. And there is courtyard so the air can go through and it doesn't get blocked. There is no opening on the edges. Openings are more in the middle so that when there is surge or high pressure of wind coming in, it would not create any problem with glass or anything. So yeah, so this is basically the plan where we have these square boxes individually placed, and the lower level has the health facilities, and in the upper level we have the mosque. So this is the mosque area. So you have the stair going up, and this is all the health facilities. We have a lobby in the middle, and these are the different rooms. That's the section. And it's a kind of a labyrinth-like space. So this is, we are going into construction now. Hopefully we should be able to finish it by next June or so. So Tropic of Cancer goes through Bangladesh, as you see here, which makes us a subtropical climate. We have a monsoon season and we have a dry season, basically. So there's two seasons, one very wet and one very dry. Now we have entered into the dry season. We won't have rain for the next 5 to 6 months. And temperature remains more or less moderate. There are some really hot days, hot, humid days, but otherwise it's a more or less reasonably, I wouldn't say extreme temperature is not there that you need to cover yourself up, or you have insulations or heating or anything. So it's a kind of a architecture do not really need that kind of a closeness. So if you see, like, this is an image which is a beautiful image of the Bangla Ragini, where it shows that all you really need is a roof and a plinth to keep you above the water level. And that's basically it. You can keep it open as you can, more like a pavilion, and let the air flow. And that's how architecture should be. And so throughout my practice from the very early on till now, this has been more my way of thinking, like you have to keep it open, or at least the airflow needs to happen. So the edges need to be very porous and very open, or it should blur the edge between what is outside and what is inside. So there is this connection between the two. And this is one of our projects, very early project, where we tried to create this courtyard, which actually creates this draft of air, which then helps the cross ventilation. This is again another project, 12-story residential project, where we also tried to open up the edges, basically to allow airflow to happen. And this is also the west facade, so it also blocks the sun in a way. Gives also the city a beautiful facade to look at, and not really balconies with clothes hanging down. So, so yeah, basically these are some of the ways I have been working, especially in the city of Dhaka. Verandas, long verandas, especially if you look at our colonial architecture. This is a beautiful form that evolved from the British colonial time, where you have these long verandas, where generally people, I remember as a child in my grandmother's house, they have these long verandas, and we used to most of the time spend our time on the veranda, and rooms were basically place where you go to sleep or rest. But the rest of the time was mostly spent in the veranda. So I like to bring back these old kind of elements, not really old, but historically and very useful elements in a way, because it kind of creates a buffer between the inside and the outside, kind of a zone where you have the in and out both at the same time, a space which is really useful in our kind of climate. So in many projects, we've tried to use that more like a wrapping, like you see here, that the long veranda goes around the building, creating this kind of facade at the same time, sheltering the whole space. So this is one of those. So this is where I show you how the entire airflow actually works. And this is very important for me. And I've been constantly working on it. This is one of the projects we did for the French-German embassy. It was a competition. The French and the Germans actually share one embassy, and we won first prize for that. So this is also similar. We had this central open space, kind of a void, and the entire embassy was surrounding the whole area, and you see the section here. So basically also keeping that in mind, that you can create that passive cooling system, even if it wouldn't be used probably for an embassy. This is again another project where we have the same thing, that you have a central atrium and the whole building kind of goes around, creating that tropical, in a way tropical way of architecture. The pavilion-like spaces on the upper level. And you see that I use a lot of brick for the reason that, as I was mentioning, that we are a delta. And if you source material from the location, that's the only material we have. If you wanted to make something permanent, it would be brick, because you take the earth and you bake it and you make it brick and then you do something. This is a monastery from the 2nd century, 3rd century, a Buddhist monastery. And we have a couple of these monasteries all around Bangladesh. And so these were, being permanent in nature, they were built in brick. And people's architecture, like more the vernaculars, were mostly always in mud. And some of these are, you know, these terracotta temples are also beautiful. It's all done in intricately designed, beautifully done. You know, mud can become magic if you do it nicely. We have really good masons as well. So there is this culture of brick masonry that exists in the land. And I think that's why I always try to, you know, I'm more trying to work with brick because of the reason. And, you know, I think it's also kind of easy to see that the construction industry is based on people who has no education in that sense. And so, you know, if you drew a drawing and take it or send it to the site, you can very sure understand that that drawing will never be followed, because nobody knows how to really read it until maybe a site engineer, and even at times the site engineers also do not. So we need to have a very close connection to the site. You have to build up a relationship with the people you work with. And everything is handcrafted. So basically, even a 12-story, 20-story buildings are all built with hand. So it's a handcrafting, and imperfection is part of the quality of architecture that is there. So you kind of, you know, over the years as we work, we build up these relationships with these people. They become part of your family. And yeah, you always feel this notion that you have to create some kind of a work for them on the site so that they're able to also run their own families. So we are constantly looking for that. So this is Dhaka. As you see, fastest growing city in the world, one of the most difficult cities, and it is constantly growing in a monstrous speed, which actually started in the bank of the Buriganga, or the old Ganges. And then it's kind of moving to the north and also to the south. And it also has the similar kind of a living pattern where you have the informal and the so-called formal living side by side. One is not without the other. They both need each other in a way. Very dense city, a lot of people. And so one of our projects, I just like to go very quickly. It's a very old project. I graduated in 1995, and then we started our office in 1996. And in 1997, there was this competition, a national open competition, where we were to design a museum for the Liberation War and our Tower of Independence. And we won the competition, being the youngest of all the competitors. We were 27, 28 years of age at that time, but it was an enormous responsibility, and we took it very seriously. And to just give you a little background on the site, this used to be a horse racing ground during the British colonial time, and during the Pakistan period, when Bangladesh was part of Pakistan, it was used as a large ground for political gatherings. And also this is the same ground where, and this is a very important image where you see that the father of the nation giving this speech in March 1971, declaring that we want to be free, so we will go into war. And in a way that triggered the War of Independence. And also after a 9-month-long bloody war, Bangladesh was finally liberated and became a sovereign country. And in 1971, the same year in December, this is the surrender of the Pakistan army to the Indian and Bangladeshi Allied Force. So this is the entire history that you see. All these 3 images happened in this, on the site. So that's the reason why this site is so important. And this is the site actually, and that's the project. It is also one of the rarest green areas of Dhaka. Dhaka is so built up that this is one of the last living green spaces that is there. So to build a museum, we thought that it would not be the right thing to do to build a building. So we went for a non-building approach where we took the museum below grade and we just created a plaza where people can come and gather. The idea was that the plaza would be a place for celebration. And since the history and the sadness of the loss of life and genocide and killing, everything which is really the darkest part should be embedded into the earth. So that's why we took the museum below grade. And that's our Tower of Independence, which is a 150 feet tower. For our independence, especially for freedom, we thought that it would be really, what we wanted to create was a tower of light. And that is what actually is the connection with, in a way, Peter Rice, and I'll talk about that. So basically, these are all the different elements. You see the museum below grade, that's our plaza, that's the tower here. It took us about 16 years to finish this project because this tower became one of the most difficult things to build. We could not get our engineers to believe that this was a possible thing, that we haven't come up with some kind of a weird idea. And so, yeah, so that was one of the biggest struggles to get that built. So this is the museum, as you see down here, just to give you an idea. So this is a circular water body, which has a central hole, and the water is basically drawing into that space. So very symbolic of those 9-month-long war. And once you go into the museum, these are the different spaces. That's the audiovisual room, and these are the different museum blocks. As you enter into the space, there's this ramp, very, this is about 24 feet below grade. And all the different events of the war are printed on glass, and these are just panels where you can just go around and have a look. And then there is this dark area where we have the images of the genocide and killing. And then once you enter into the central chamber, there is this column of water that has light coming through. This is the daylight coming through that column, the only source of light. And there is no exhibition in here. So it's a more of a contemplative space where you gather and just remember the people who were lost. So that's the tower. Actually, when we designed it, as I mentioned, that we took glass, not as a material, but glass is the material that holds light. So the tower is actually a tower of light. And our idea was to have a space frame in the middle, and there would be glass panels which are stacked, and then these stacked glass would create a panel, and then that will be cladded onto the facade. So the glass doesn't take any load, but the structure itself is the load bearing, would take the load, and basically that was the idea. But the government, especially the engineers in the government, said this is an impossible thing. Nobody has ever done this before. There is no precedence in the world, so we won't be able to build it. So that's when we turned to who could really do this for us. And we kind of started searching. And for us, I think, you know, it was 1997, so obviously Peter Rice wasn't there. So, but RFR was there. So we thought, you know, we should get in touch with them. So we did get in touch with them. And we went to Paris to meet with them. And we had meetings with them. And you know, I wish Peter Rice was there, and we could really, probably it would have been much easier for us to build it. But then we had meetings, and everybody we met, all the engineers, even we met with Ur Roof, and all of them said that this is a very much buildable project. And, you know, everybody was interested in building it. But there was this anxiousness in the government that, no, this is just not a possibility. So it really was a struggle, and at the end we were able to finish it. It took us 16 years, as I mentioned. So by 2013, we were able to finally finish it. So as you see, that's the tower, that's the structure in the middle, and the glass is basically stacked and cladded on. That's an image of the evening. So just coming to the end, this is the last project. I'll go very quickly. So this is the mosque that I built, and the mosque for which I got the Aga KhanAward. The blue dot you see here, that's the northern end of Dhaka city. So the site is actually absolutely to the northern edge of the city. And the city has actually grown, as you know, that it's in a very tremendously high, very fast pace. And this area, which used to be an agrarian land, also went through fast transformation. And while I was designing, I knew that this would be the case. This is my grandmother. She is actually the client for the project. So this land actually belonged to her, and she wanted to donate this land to build a mosque. And she very generously, very officially in a way, very formally asked me that would I be interested in designing it and building it. And of course, I would not say no to my grandmother. And so basically I said, of course, I will do it. And I'm also the only architect in the family. So that's also the reason. So you see here, this is a gathering, which is the first groundbreaking ceremony where we had a prayer. And you see my grandmother sitting there right in front of a haystack. It was still a very village-like atmosphere then. And this is 2006, September. And my grandmother passed away in 2006, December, the same year. And so for me, it was a promise that I made to her, and I had to fulfill it. So that's how this entire project became. I became not only the designer, but also the fundraiser, also the architect, builder, everything. So looking into the mosque, obviously it's 2006, 9/11 has already happened. There was a lot of questioning, a lot of identity about Islam and Muslims, and all these things were already there. So that was a time when I was questioning this whole idea of identity, how you identify yourself and your belief. And at the same time, looking into what mosque used to be or how it came into being, Bengal legacy of the mosque, and then also the site being a space which is going through a transition, spirituality as the main element of design, and then questioning this whole idea of symbolism, and then sense of ownership to create with the community who are living in that area. So these are all the things that I brought up as my own research into the project. So first thing is, what is a mosque? So if you look at if you go to the very beginning of mosque actually came as a space of gathering, a congregational space, and the form was generated from the house form. So a house form in the Arabian Peninsula, let's say, elongated, turned into a space for congregation, and that's how mosque came into being. But as Islam moved from the Arabian Peninsula to the east and the west, it took many different forms. Basically, it adapted to the local culture, the local custom, the construction techniques, material, climate. And you see all different kind of forms in the entire world. So that's also something quite unique, that it adapts to the location. And if you see in our Bengal landscape, you'll see these kind of mosques from the Sultanate period when Islam came into Bengal in the 14th, 15th century. And these are the mosques that you see. And this is the scene of mosque now. And you see these are stacks of floors. There is no quality of space or aesthetic or anything. These are just shops in the ground level, and then they're just stacks of floors. So this whole idea of, and what I find quite fascinating is that even there is no quality of space, there is still those symbols, which I feel that absolutely not necessary at all. So basically, I questioned that. Do you really need those domes and minarets and those? So I tried to look more into the idea of spirituality. And for me, light is an absolutely beautiful element that really helps you to capture that sense of spirituality. And so that became the main essence of the project. That's the site here. And the way the site is located, as you know, that the Muslims pray in a certain direction, which is the direction of Mecca. And so we call it Qibla. So the direction of Mecca and the site had a shift, which is about a 12 to 13 degrees of shift. So I had to create that shift in the prayer hall. So I tried, obviously, that's the site, which is a kind of a square site, 75 feet by 75 feet. And the prayer hall, I placed it in the middle. And I inserted this drum-like space to facilitate that shift so that it does not make people disoriented or doesn't give me those corners. So that's the model you see. And what we did is when you insert that prayer hall, you have this open to sky volumes, which then acts as the courtyards, which actually creates this draft of air. So these are some of the older structures. And from there, I created this conceptual drawing where you see that the prayer hall is in the middle and the edges are more or less load-bearing structure. So since, as I mentioned, that my grandmother donated the land, she did give us a small sum of money to initiate the project, but the rest of it, we had to raise fund from the locals, and they were happily, generously giving us whatever they could. And I also had to raise fund from family, friends, from wherever I could get. And so since budget was one of the main constraints, we created the prayer hall as a column-free open space, but the rest of the wrapping around the prayer hall was entirely brick. So it's a load-bearing brick structure. And if you see here, these are the entire load-bearing brick structures, and the central prayer hall is the column-free space. And one thing is, porosity, as I mentioned, in our location, especially from the climate. We created this brick facade, which was very porous. As I was mentioning, you don't see that farmland anymore. It's all built up. So there are new buildings coming up every single day. And that's the mosque in the middle. So the area is mostly lower middle income families living there. Yeah, so after the award, there are a lot of tourism, mosque tourism happening. A lot of people are coming here. People are very proud of their mosque, and they do look after it quite well. That's the imam of the mosque. So this is where you see the open to sky space where light is coming in. And as I mentioned, that I tried to use light because it's free. It doesn't cost you anything, just a few nice section drawings, and you can really do magic with light. And also, different time of the day, the entire thing changes, and from different seasons, it also changes very rapidly. So from April to November, each season is very different. So I'll finish it here. Thank you so much for your patience. Just probably, yeah, that's 10 minutes over my time. So yeah.
Marina, this is where if we were in person, the crowd would erupt in rapturous applause. It's one of the things that I miss the most about being in person. So thank you very much. That was terrific.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sure everyone else is doing the same.
I know. I also miss that, when you don't see the faces, how people react. Yeah. If someone is falling to sleep, then you have to rush.
Exactly. That was wonderful. And the fact that it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you continue with so much energy was really admirable. I think I wasn't expecting to see so much work from this incredibly strange year. So, I mean, seeing all of the wonderful work you've done in the past, is so inspiring. But then seeing what you've done since you know, February, March in this year is so admirable and so inspiring. I'm sure the students have been kind of rocked by your hard work and it could really difficult situation.
Absolutely, yeah.
We have a question in the chat from Edith. Edith from Arups. Edith, would you like to ask the question if you're still there?
Yes, thank you. It was a very simple question, really. I just wondered with your mobile houses that you were making in the sand beds, whether you provide or there's an interest in providing any kind of communal facilities for sanitation and so on that could go with the houses and shift as the houses shifted.
Yeah, we do have the sanitation. We also have one of these, there is a local, a small, I would say, community architects group who actually has devised a very interesting way of doing these sanitation, like toilet facilities. And so we are taking their toilet facilities and the design and also trying to implement that. That's also quite reasonably priced. So if we have the houses, we will take the toilet facilities from them, and it's quite easily done. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
What do you think about the structure? Do you think it
I'll hand over to Rory for the structure.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to ask what sort of wind regime they might see year in, year out, and that must be the biggest issue.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, what we've seen in the villages, what they do is they have the main problem is when the wind comes and then it wants to take out the roof, basically the tin roofs. So they need to keep that roof in place. So what they do is they tie these corrugated sheets on the edges, and then they take the bicycle tires and then they place it on the ground, because the bicycle tires then gives it the flexibility to move with the wind, but it doesn't like fly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's damping. Passive damping. That's excellent. Right. I'd love to see more, and let's talk if you need some input.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you.
At least ask.
Sure. Very good. We have a question. Maybe we'll take maybe 2 more questions, and then I think that should be it to give Marina a break. Tom, would you like to ask your question first, and then
just a very quick one? And really, it's about working in dynamic situations. So, it's just how you get the interplay between active and passive systems, really, active and passive approaches, quick and slow things when you're working in a situation that's evolving and changing, because everything you've shown us pretty much has either radically changed over through the ground disappearing or radically changed through being overwhelmed. So what's your views on how you do that, particularly within the context of climate, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, is it necessary to have both, both approaches?
Right. Well, it depends where I am working. Like when you're working in the deltas, Dhaka is a city, right? But Dhaka is Dhaka. It's such a central, everything, the entire country revolves around Dhaka mostly. And there's another city, let's say Chittagong. The other cities are much smaller than that. So Dhaka is Bangladesh. Bangladesh is Dhaka in many ways. I mean, in terms of urban context. But the rest of the country is still very, very rural. And especially when you go to the south, where we have these movement of land and delta, when you go there, it's a very different scenario. So when I go there, I'm a different architect than when I'm working in Dhaka, let's say. Dhaka, the situations are far more complex, and this idea of ventilation and light and everything becomes much more crucial, because you're working in a dense situation. Mm. And when you are going to let's say the coastal areas, it requires an absolutely different kind of approach, because of the context. And both are very uniquely powerful. Dhaka being a very dense city and requires a certain different kind of a mindset and your approach, and so does the rural areas. So I would say I'm two architects in one.
That's good to know. Radical character shift then.
Mm-hmm.
Good, thank you.
Marina, would you take one more question?
Sure.
Okay, so, sorry, Tom, did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I'm just,
okay.
they're just very interested. It's great.
Yeah, great. Okay, one more, and I need to read it out. It's from our colleague Gül Kaçmazerk. She says, thank you so much. This is by far my favorite lecture of 2020, including her own lectures, she says.
Oh, wow, thank you.
I would like to ask about the influence of architect Sinan, especially in the Suleymaniye Mosque, and Louis Khan's work in Bangladesh, in your mosque. Thank you.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously both are, you can see it, right? I mean, yeah, Khan is so powerfully present in our landscape that there is no way of escaping it. Once you get into architecture, that's the first building you get introduced to. So that's your benchmark. You can never reach there, but you can only attempt. So yeah, I mean, I do have a lot of influence, you know, especially in terms of light and his notion of timelessness in many ways. You know, his projects are very timeless. So, you know, you can only attempt, and that's what I have in many of my projects tried to attempt. I don't know how successful, only time will tell, but yeah, so that's my thing. And Sinan, obviously, yes, but more than Sinan, I would say the Hagia Sophia, let's say. You see the light. I've been there in a bright daylight, and I've been there in a very gloomy day, and the difference is so stark. And what light does to that space, to me, is just, you know, that really was a time when the entire idea of architecture changed for me, that it's not about the space or the form, it's all about light.
Good. Well, thank you very much for the questions. And again, a roaring round of applause, Marina, for all your hard work in putting that together for us and for showing us everything up to and including probably today's work. So thank you so, so much. We really look forward to having you in Belfast at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I look forward to that. Yes.
And thanks again to the Arup Trust and to Michael McGarry for hosting this so well. So this is it's very difficult to finish meetings like this, but thank you very much. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina.
Thanks. Okay. All right then.
Okay.
So I can sign off, go to sleep now?
Good night.
All right. All right. Good night.
Thank you, Marina. It was wonderful.
Bye. Bye.